72,000 voices roaring, lights ripping the night, and then a cut. No cymbals, no chorus. A thin child's shout threads the dark like a match. Freddie Mercury doesn't fill the gap with noise. He leans into it. 12 heartbeats later, the stadium will be crying. Wembley Stadium, London, July 1986. Summer heat slicks the rails. Beer cups rattle underfoot. Arc lights hum. Sources differ on the exact seat and exact words. But a young voice rises from the frontiers and makes the biggest venue in Britain feel suddenly small. The night had been a machine. Queen were deep into their 86 set, the kind of precision that makes spectacle look easy. Radio Gaga had just rolled over Wembley like weather, palms clapping in synchronized waves. You could feel the upper tiers move. Then an almost impossible dip. Not a missed cue. Something gentler. The band's volume thinned as if someone cupped the hurricane. Audience cams, those wobbly home videos, later traded from hand to hand, showheads turning, like a murmuration shifting direction. In that hush, a small voice rose, high, trembling, close to the stage, but not on it. It wasn't a chant. It wasn't the usual stadium command response. It sounded like a plea or a question, or maybe the bravest request anyone had ever made with 72,000 witnesses. Freddie heard it. Of course he did. Watching him in recordings from that tour, you notice the microbeats between confidence and care. Beat, he plants his heels. He lowers the mic. He doesn't rush to fill the silence with a joke. Brian May glances over, one of those quick musician checks hands hovering over strings, waiting for the next cue that never arrives. Roger Taylor's sticks ride the edge of a groove, then soften to air. For exactly 12 seconds count, then Wembley is a cathedral of listening. Receipts matter here. A ticket stub, stamped the 12th of July 1986, Queen Plus support, Wembley Stadium, still turns up in fan posts and auction lots. One example surfaced in 2019 with seat details inked in blue biro. Contemporary set lists archived by Fans Place Radio, Gaga, late in the show on both Wembley nights, aligning with what the crowd videos capture. The stadium already warmed to boiling when the temperature suddenly fell. And here's the contradiction that makes this moment carry. The biggest band, at the biggest venue, at the peak of their loudest tour, who risks stillness inside a machine that sells noise? Have you ever felt an arena hesitate, not from confusion, but out of respect for something smaller than itself? A ripple goes through the pit. Security eases forward, then stalls. The spot operator drifts light across the barrier, unsure whether to search or stay wide on the front man. A child's outline lifts above shoulders. There's a hand, a face, a flash of white, maybe a shirt, maybe a sign impossible to know for sure from grainy tape, but unmistakable in effect. Thousands reorient toward one person. Freddie takes a half step downstage, eyes fixed on the rows. The music hasn't ended. It's holding its breath. He steps closer and lowers the mic even further. There were no blueprints for this. Queen shows were engineered with the precision of an Olympic ceremony, lights locked to bars. Fireworks, pre-timed transitions, nailed down to the second. Wembley especially. Every beat had been drilled during rehearsals at Bray Studios. Yet here was Freddie Mercury, standing in sequins and spotlight, breaking the script. Brian May glanced over, hands hovering above the red special, eyes asking, "Do we move?" Roger Taylor let his sticks hover just above the toms. John Deacon's bass line thinned to silence. The entire band froze in orbit around one man waiting on his signal, and Freddie. He did nothing. Beat for nearly 12 seconds. He gave the crowd the rarest thing possible in a rock show. Stillness. Fans who swapped cassettes later would swear you can hear it, the shift from noise to something sharper. Not silence exactly. Listening. A widely shared bootleg, labeled Wembley Night 2 Audience Mix, captures the swell of crowd static collapsing into one fragile quiet. You can even hear a lone voice trying to shout Freddie before it dies off, swallowed by anticipation. Mercury tilted his head slightly, feline in his poise, and let a smile curl just enough to tease the audience. But he didn't speak. He crouched forward, mic-lowered eyes searching the pit as though tuning to a different frequency. The cameras missed it. The BBC broadcast cut wide at that moment, but audience video shows him leaning down, eyes narrowing, as if he's aligning himself with the tiny figure who had called out. And here's the hook inside the hook. 12 seconds doesn't sound long. Try holding a pause that length while 72,000 expect you to roar. It's an eternity. Yet Mercury held it without flinch. Have you ever felt time stretch because someone dared to wait? This was not the flamboyant strut of Crazy Little Thing Called Love or the operatic thunder of Bohemian Rhapsody. This was something else. A risk. Because in live performance, the line between magic and awkwardness is paper thin. The pause could have collapsed under heckles or impatience, but it didn't. The longer he waited, the stronger the gravity became. Audience cam footage catches small details, a hand trembling against the barrier, the flash of a banner folding back down, shoulders shifting as the crowd leaned forward. The hush was not empty. It was electric. Finally, after 12 counted beats, Freddie raised the microphone. But no lyrics came. The band held their breath behind him. The crowd leaned forward, unsure if he would laugh, chastise, or bless. And then he spoke. What he heard in that silence is still debated. Some fans swear it was a girl's voice calling, "Please, don't stop." Others insist she named a song, maybe Love of My Life, maybe something she carried in her heart. The truth is blurred, but every account agrees on two things. The voice was small, and it cut Wembley in half. In the pit, a girl no older than 10 was hoisted onto someone's shoulders. Audience footage grainy, but watch closely shows her arm reaching forward, waving not like a crazed fan, but like someone asking to be seen. She wasn't chanting with the rest. She was pleading. A fan diary published later in Queen Fanzine issue number 34 describes it like this. We all stopped clapping. It was like hearing a child speak in church. That single line became one of the most quoted recollections of the night. Freddie's brow softened. The showman who strutted and teased suddenly shifted into something gentler, almost parental. He lifted one hand, palm outward, as though to shield her from the frenzy of the crowd. Roadies paused, unsure if they should intervene or stay frozen. The band waited. The stadium, a machine of noise and light, bent itself toward a single child's request. Think about the contrast. This was Wembley, the biggest stage in Britain, built for colossus voices and thunderous sound. Yet, at its center, 72,000 people leaned in to hear one trembling child. How often does the world quiet itself for the smallest voice? The spotlight swept the pit like a searchlight, catching faces, banners, hands, and then it landed. A tiny figure lit up in the wash of white. The child shielded her eyes, still waving, still calling out. For a moment, All the power of the band, the lights, the crowd, all of it was redirected toward her. Freddie lowered his mic close to his lips, as if in conversation with one person, not 70,000. The weight of the pause became unbearable. What would he say? Would he joke? Ignore it? Or would he unthinkably hand the night over? Mercury leaned in, eyes locked on the child, lips close enough to brush the mesh of the microphone, and then he answered. He could have laughed it off. He could have moved on, drowned her out with the roar of the band and the setlist momentum. But he didn't. Instead, in a voice warm but firm, Freddie Mercury spoke 6 words that bent Wembley to a hush. "This is your song tonight, darling." The words carried differently than lyrics. They weren't sung. They were gifted, and instantly the crowd erupted, not in its usual frenzy of claps and stomps, but in something stranger, more vulnerable. People cheered through tears. Parents hugged their children tighter. Men who had been chanting like football fans wiped their eyes with the backs of their hands. A widely circulated bootleg, Wembley Night 2 audience mix, captures the moment with eerie clarity. You hear Mercury's words, faint but steady, followed by a split second of stunned silence before a swell that is less raw and more sobbing cheer. The atmosphere pivots from carnival to communion in the span of a heartbeat. Those 6 words did more than soothe the child. They folded 72,000 people into a single intimate circle. Wembley Stadium, built for scale, suddenly felt like a living room. One of the enemy reviewers present later described the crowd as weeping like family, not fans. That phrasing stuck because it captured the paradox. Strangers becoming kin through one man's decision to answer softly, "Think about the risk he took." Performers often keep distance. It protects the illusion. But here was Freddie, king of the spectacle, tearing down the wall. Have you ever seen a single sentence cradle a crowd as if it were one body? The child on shoulders beamed through the spotlight, her hands still in the air, and for her, the largest stage in the world became hers for a night. That memory, whether she spoke, "Please don't stop," or named her favorite song, would be retold in fanzines, in interviews, in countless bootleg swaps for decades. And Freddie, never one to waste a gesture, wasn't finished. He had answered with words, yes. But in the language of music, he was about to answer again with melody itself. He glanced back at Brian May. The guitarist nodded almost imperceptibly, already adjusting. Roger Taylor shifted on his stool, sticks poised. John Deacon flexed his fingers over the strings. The next beat would not follow the plan. The setlist for Wembley was a machine, locked down to the second. Every light cue, every firework, every chord progression rehearsed. Yet, in that moment, Freddie Mercury tore it open. He turned to Brian May, gave the smallest nod, and the Red Special answered with a gentler chord than scripted. Roger Taylor eased back on the drums. John Deacon's bass softened, and suddenly the colossal show bent into something unplanned. Fans recall it like a ripple. 1 second, a storm of rock. The next, a lullaby stretched across concrete and steel. Some accounts say he shifted into a tender intro of "Love of My Life," a song already weighted with intimacy. Others insist it was simply improvisation, Freddie weaving a melody around the child's plea. The exact notes differ in memory, but the feeling was universal. The biggest stage in Britain transformed into a fireside gathering. A 1999 Mojo magazine interview with Brian May recalls that night. He had this instinct he could turn anything, any interruption, into theatre, but that one felt different. It was like he was singing only for her. That recollection, decades later, anchors what thousands felt in real time. In the crowd, strangers leaned into one another. Some clasped hands with people they had never met. Others swayed, voices cracking as they tried to follow Freddie's lead. Not from poor pitch, but from the tremor of emotion. Wembley blurred. It no longer felt like a stadium. It felt like a circle. Editors who pored over the audience cams later spotted something subtle. Freddie's eyes returning, again and again, to the child on shoulders. Every few lines, every turn of phrase, he glanced back, reaffirming that this wasn't a theatrical trick. This was for her. And yet, the beauty was how it spread. His dedication to one fan became a dedication to all. When he improvised a line, thousands heard it as if whispered directly to them. That's the paradox only great performers touch. Intimacy scaled to a crowd so large it should be impossible. What does it mean when 72,000 people feel like they're sitting in the same living room? When a rock anthem dissolves into a shared secret? The song carried on, thinner than the planned arrangement, but heavier in meaning. Every note wrapped around the child's request until the melody itself became the answer. And when the final chord faded, Wembley did not explode immediately into applause. Instead, it sank into something heavier. The last chord fell, and for a moment Wembley did not roar. It sighed, a soundless exhale carried by 72,000 lungs. Then came the tears. Not trickles, not scattered sobs. You can see it even in the broadcast footage. Men in denim jackets hugging. Women pressing tissues to their cheeks. Teenagers stunned quiet. Security guards, trained to be stone, were caught blinking hard. One later told NME in its July 1986 issue, "I've worked Stones, Springsteen, Bowie. I've never seen that many crying at once. Even the band felt it." Roger Taylor, behind his kit, admitted years later that one hit us differently. We didn't play it, we lived it. In the upper tiers, where the sound often smears into echo, people stood shoulder to shoulder, unable to speak. Down in the pit, strangers held onto each other as though family. Their voices cracked from singing, but steadied by something else. Freddie stood in the middle of it all. Mic lowered, sweat glistening under the lights. A man known for commanding chaos suddenly presiding over tenderness. He wasn't smiling wide now. He looked almost reverent, as though the spectacle he'd built had turned on him and revealed something deeper. Bootleggers who replayed, their tapes caught the difference. Normally, after a ballad or crowd, single-long applause bursts within 2 seconds. Here, you count 8 before the first proper cheer. 8 seconds of stunned quiet in a place designed for noise. Have you ever seen strangers cry as one body? And when the noise finally returned, it wasn't the usual roar. It was jagged, messy, broken by laughter through tears. Wembley sounded human again. The ripple carried past the gates. In pubs that night, fans told the story before the band had even finished their encore. By the next morning, the press was circling. Could a single child really stop the biggest rock show on earth? Was it staged? Was it rehearsed? The NME headline the following week dodged certainty. Mercury turns Wembley into chapel. That phrasing stuck, because it captured the contradiction noise turned sacred. But as the headlines spread, so did rumors, distortions, and myths stopped by sunrise. The story had already slipped beyond Wembley's walls. Fans poured into pubs, train stations, hotel lobbies, each retelling their version. And with every retelling, the details shifted. Some said the child fainted and was carried away by medics. Others swore Freddie pulled her on stage, a vision that, while moving, has no photographic or film evidence. These flourishes became folklore, stitched into the memory of a night already glowing. The tabloids pounced. Headlines in the following days painted Mercury as a saint, a mischief maker, even a father figure depending on the paper. One London daily ran the line, "Mercury silences Wembley for a child." Another pushed to claim that the entire thing was rehearsed. But those who were there, those who traded tapes and swapped fanzines, knew it hadn't been. The spontaneity was the very thing that made it unforgettable. Bootleg recordings spread like contraband scripture. A cassette marked Night 2 audience mix was copied endlessly, passed hand to hand across Europe and later across oceans. Fans in Tokyo, New York, Buenos Aires heard the hush secondhand, as if they too had stood in that moment. Soon, the story was no longer just Wembley's. It belonged to everyone who told it. The Queen Fan Club magazine, Winter 1986 edition, ran letters from across the UK. One wrote, "My son was in the stands that night. He's 11. He came home and said, 'Freddie stopped just for her.'" That line captured how myth expands. One child became every child. One voice every fan's surrogate. And the embellishments didn't weaken the memory. They strengthened it. A legend doesn't ask for accuracy, asks for resonance. Think of how campfire stories grow taller with each telling. At some point, fact and fable hold equal weight. When does memory become legend? Even inside the band, recollections differed. Brian May, years later, described the event as a moment of pure theatre. Born in real time, Roger Taylor recalled the hush but not the exact words. That ambiguity gave the myth room to breathe, to spread, to survive. Decades later, fans still debate online, what did the child say? What did Freddie really reply? Each bootleg, each diary, each clipping adds a puzzle piece, but no definitive answer. And maybe that's the point. Legends don't need resolution. They need retelling. And so, what began as 12 seconds of silence grew into a story that outlived the night itself. Time moves forward, but some pauses never end. When Freddie Mercury's life was remembered in documentaries and tribute concerts, the Wembley moment surfaced again and again. Not the fireworks, not the perfectly timed encores this. The night he stopped everything for a child. In Queen, Days of Our Lives, BBC. 2011, the Wembley concert is revisited as one of the band's most triumphant peaks. Yet what fans wrote in the margins of fanzines and letters wasn't about decibels or attendance records. It was about compassion. One fan letter, read aloud in the documentary, described it simply. "For that second, I knew he was listening to us, not just performing at us." Parents carried the story forward. They told their children, "Freddie once stopped for someone your age." Concert-goers passed it down, not as fact-checked history, but as parable. Tribute artists' imitators who wore the crown and mustaches sometimes paused mid-show, echoing the gesture. Even if they never knew the exact words, they knew the posture. Silence that says, "I see you." And here's where the scale flips again. Freddie Mercury was one of the loudest icons in rock history. His range, his costumes, his theatrics, everything shouted loud. Yet the story that survives strongest is the opposite. A moment of stillness, a voice smaller than his, and his decision to answer it. Isn't it strange how the smallest act can outlive the largest stage? What became of the child? No one can say for certain. Sources differ, rumors abound, but she remains unnamed in any official record. And maybe that's fitting. She is every fan who ever wanted to be heard. Every outsider hoping the spotlight might swing their way for once. In 1992, when Wembley filled again for the Freddie Mercury tribute concert, some fans claimed they felt echoes of that hush between songs, as if the stadium itself remembered. That may be myth, but it shows how far the story traveled, and so the legacy holds. The greatest power Freddie Mercury wielded wasn't volume, it was listening. One child's fragile request, lifted into the roar of 70,000, reminded the world that sometimes the bravest art is to stop, wait, and hear. And that single pause, born in 1986, still echoes louder than fireworks. Freddie Mercury is remembered for his voice, his flamboyance, his command of stages no one else could fill. But the night at Wembley proved something quieter, that greatness isn't always about volume. Sometimes it's about knowing when to pause, when to hand the spotlight to someone smaller, when to let compassion interrupt spectacle. That child's fragile request, whether perfectly recorded or blurred by memory, remains stronger than any encore. Because in that moment, Mercury reminded us that music isn't just performance, it's connection. Silence can be louder than the loudest chorus if it's filled with care. And that is the note that endures. Now it's your turn. What do you think the child really said that night? Share your version in the comments below. And tell us, which song would you want Freddie Mercury to stop and dedicate to you? Your answers keep this moment alive, one voice at a time.